Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. If you're new to the channel, thank you for being here. As you're in chat, always be respectful of families, mods, and each other. Mrs. Steve here will be keeping a list of questions as the presentation goes along. If you have any questions, throw them in there, and we'll try to get to all of them at the end of the presentation. Tonight, we're going to be talking about if Shannan Gilbert is any links through the individuals and the night of when she went missing. In chat, be mindful of not using any full names of anything. I will be referring to certain individuals as driver, homeowner, things of that generic. We just don't want names thrown out there into the investigation. I know they're out there, they're public record, they're in the papers, and they've been mentioned numerous times. But part of our of what we do with our channel is we just don't want to expose people that aren't involved or law enforcement hasn't directly put into the path of the court system. And so just be mindful of names and any accusations against any individual that you put in here will more than likely get you booted. So let's not do that. Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, we'll get started. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Shannan Gilbert, who was a young lady. She was an escort and who came up missing in May of 2010. She had went out, and of course, if you listen to the 911 tape of that very disturbing call of what when she contacted and that she was being pursued, and the investigations revealed a lot of things about her that night. And so we're going to be talking about some of the actions and some of the comments that were made that night and the circumstances that has led to the discovery of the Go-Go 4 plus all the other possible victims that will be linked to the Heuermann and his accusation that he is the Long Island serial offender. And is there a link? Because as I was looking at this case, and I wanted to start back on square one of what created and what led to the eventual arrest of Rex, was this young lady here being missing, and then through the searches for her is when they came across the bodies of the other victims. And it's going to be one of the greatest coincidences out there that have occurred in many, many years, as far as is one death linked to the other deaths. And right now, there's no evidence supporting that. But there is evidence supporting, in my opinion, that this wasn't, that Shannan did not die by natural causes. There's certain things to me that I find extremely suspicious. Now, she could have died from natural causes, but the indicators and some of the information of how she was found and things that around her that just doesn't make sense, especially when you listen to the 911 call. Chris and I last night, we talked about in pretty deep detail on his show, but I think there's more to be looked at and more understanding of the circumstances about her. And did she fall victim to another offender, or is she one of Rex's? It just hasn't been connected yet. Of course, law enforcement says that her death is just of a accident, of becoming lost, confused, under influence of whatever intoxicants, and died in the swampy area of where she was found due to her intoxication. And is it possible? Yes, but is it likely? You know, and we're going to discuss that a little bit more. And I don't totally go along with that line of thought. And but she was found. She was found close to the gated community of where she was last seen and where she had went to meet with the homeowner that had made arrangements for her to come there. And during that 911 call, when she says that she's being chased and that and the 911 operator was unable to track the number and give a location, and which was a very confusing call. And it's just part of the technologies at the time. But you would think that the technologies that as they've progressed nowadays, it's far greater, and so you wouldn't probably have that situation. Although there's certain parts of the country where 911 still you can't even make contact with, and I've been in some of those areas recently. But with this case, and during the circumstances around that and that night, as she felt that she was being pursued, and through the 911 tapes, you can hear people in the background, the homeowner and the driver who was there as far as the providing uh, her transportation to the residence and back, I assume. Um, in the situation of them trying to control her or trying to make calm her down and get her back where she could go, and she didn't want to have anything to do with that. And there are certain intoxications and certain reactions. Sometimes you'll see that where people will have a reaction. It can be a chemical imbalance, um, and they just go into this mental state of where they of extreme paranoia. Could she have suffered that? Absolutely. But could she also have been absolutely telling the truth? And these circumstances existed. Abs- yes, I believe that is possible. And some of the other details, I believe, would be supporting that there was something that occurred after the 911 calls, and um, and after she fled this residence where she was at. It was at 451 whenever she was meeting her client at this residence. I didn't give the address, didn't put the name in there, but it's a gated community or gated resident, and it's several miles up the coast from Gilgo Beach, but it's still in the same geographical area. It's 6, 7, 8 miles, depends on Google Earth, and then uh, if you do go as the crow flies, it's only around 6 miles. But I'm sure by land it's a little bit different. Um, and so we have to look at it that geographically we have is there a possibility that you could have a homicide victim, and while you're looking at this looking for this homicide victim, you discover something far more sinister. And right now, that's exactly what we have to go on and look at. But we'll also discuss some of the other factors. But and one of the most interesting facts is that while they were looking for her in the area near Oak Beach, um, they were able to find her purse identification, which would probably be in the purse, the phone, and jeans. I don't know if they were scattered or they were all within a certain area, or if what condition they were in, and was it a streaming debris field of missing articles and clothing, or was it all something that was tossed together and um, which would be indicative of a different type of scene versus someone that would be suffering hypothermia. And we're going to be looking at the weather conditions, and because absolutely under certain conditions, people will disrobe suffering hypothermia. That's not going to be the case with this. I looked up the weather for that May the 1st date, and 60 and 70 degree air temp and stuff. That don't see you being able to go into that. And we're only talking about a short time frame from 4 something of whenever she would become disrobed to the time that the sun would be up and the temperature is rising, as you'll see with the weather report. But after finding the clothing and these articles in the purse indicating that they were in the right area, that they brought in certain vehicles so they could navigate through that swampy, um, marsh-like area. And that's where they came upon the skeletal remains of her. And it's about a quarter mile. And, you know, when you're talking about a location that she had to travel partially disrobed through this type of uh, terrain and foliage, is that something that she would have done? For the fact that when we look at, and I pulled up some satellite images from Google Earth, and you'll be able to see that in the area where she was at, if you were dead center of that swampy marsh area, the furthest you are from either a house or from the highway, if you went in any directions, straight east or straight west, is 150 yards, 450 feet. Um, and that's not, that great of a distance. I don't care how marshy or otherwise. It's not something that, that couldn't be, uh, trekked through by almost any individual in reasonably good health. And of course, she may have been under the influence, but she was able to stay ahead of both her driver and the homeowner, and able to navigate and go up to people's houses screaming for help. And they all contacted 911. So she wasn't to the point that during the previous almost half hour or so that she was on the road surfaces, that she was still, able to uh, move and navigate reasonably well. And but when we have the separation of her clothing and articles away from a skeleton, to me that tells me that we have something of that occurred. That how do we have the separation of those clothing items, and why do we have the separation of those clothing items? And we have to look further into that, for the fact that, of course, anyone that's under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or otherwise, um, yes, they can fall and they can pass out. But generally, it's not going to be a person that has been screaming, "I'm being chased. They're trying to harm me, and I'm in fear of my life. I need help, and I'm calling 911," because she had the mental ability to call 911, and which she wants help. She, a lot of times when you see people that are intoxicated or under drugs, the last person they'll ever call is law enforcement or 911. They'll call, family and friends, but she called 911. She took the right mental approach that who can bring me the help because I'm in fear of my life. And then, of course, she's found, deceased several months later, just over a year, I believe, from that time. But about a quarter mile from where her other items had been found, and you can see that this boggy, swampy looking area near these homes, that even at 4 o'clock in the morning with the highway on one side, the ocean on the other, there's going to be a lot of cues of where you're at all times. You'll have cars going up and down the highway. You'll have the sound of the ocean. You'll have at that time of night the vehicles that's on the roadway. You'd be able to see those car lights, and not only that, but not far from there is a huge interchange with elevated roads, bridges, and otherwise, so that you know that would be above all the brush and tree line. Um, and so we have to take that into account too, that she would have markers that she would be able to see certain vehicles. But let's see what else. Okay. And the reason that we have to see if there's a link between Rex and the and Shannan is due to that it's on the same road surface, the same seaside roadway of that the other 10 victims have been found. And with, from furthest point to furthest point, 6 to 8 miles, closest point to some of the other victims, 2 to 3 miles from where she was at to where the other victims were. But there's a little bit, like I said, we just don't have anything that shows right now that there's a link. Now that will probably either be substantiated for the fact now, back then with the homeowner and with the driver, we didn't know who the serial offender Rex was. But now we know who Rex is. And we know that Rex dealt with escorts. And he dealt with a lot of escorts. And if he's responsible for these victims, then he probably was on the prowl and had probably dealt with a lot of the protectors or the pimps or the individuals that work with these escort services that provided transportation, the drivers, and so that now that law enforcement has a name, they'll go back to these individuals, they'll go back to this homeowner and see, is there a connection? Is there something that says, yes, Rex knew him? And now if Rex knows the homeowner, that's going to be a huge indicator that, yes, there's probably something to it. If Rex has contact with this driver or with the agency or with Shannan Gilbert's phone number in any shape, form, or fashion, then that again will be huge. And law enforcement now has that avenue of what phones did they have back then, what burner phones did Rex have, and what links and cross-referencing, and what could we try to look at and see if these victims or if Shannan crossed paths with Rex at any point, or did the homeowner cross paths with Rex at any point, or did the driver cross paths? And if they did so, then we can start leaning a little bit more towards that there is a connection, but we just don't have any connections now. And this is all new information for law enforcement to react to. And so will they be able to make a link? We'll have to see as we go further. Let's see here. But like I said, as the crow flies from the location of where she was found, Shannan, to where the furthest victim for that currently identified victim of Rex is about 6 miles. And I also looked at, when we were looking at this area, what other features about the area where she was found at, that when you look at this, and I did a Google Earth of the marsh swampy area where she was found, it came out between, just over 900 feet, 300 yards. And so that if you stood dead center at the furthest point, any time that she was in this area, and I took one of the widest areas to that, because there's certain areas that it's far closer, it's far less than 940 feet, that at any point while she's in this marshy area, if she was wanting to go to a home or go to the roadway, like I said, she's less than 150 yards at generally any point directly east or west, and which is very interesting as far as if she was wanting further help or she was able to get help. This is what the weather for May of 2010, May the 1st, will look like. You can, I'll have to blow it up here so I can see it a little bit better. But around the 4 o'clock time period, you can see that the lows were somewhere around 64 degrees. And somewhere between 70 and 79 degrees between 12 and 6 a.m. And that is not the temperature of something that would put you into, especially if you've been running or active and you're sweating, you're hot, that would put you into any type of the hypothermia part of it. But, you know, chemical imbalances can also have certain things. But I really don't think uh, it was really a chemical imbalance. Do I think she might have been drugged? Absolutely. Um, and as we've seen in a lot of cases, and if you look at a lot of these uh, people that try to take advantage of these escorts and women that are trafficked, that they will bring on certain type of drugs and introduce it into it for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's consensual and it's mutual agreement, yes. But we don't know what the cases are on this type of drugs possibly are involved in this. Don't know what the autopsy was able to reveal. But on this little capture from Google Earth, just to about the 9 o'clock position, just outside of where the roads fork, is where Shannan was found. And so you have this huge intersection, elevated highways, and not only for that and the link of that she possibly could have got out of this, but to the right of here is a state park. And the reason I captured this is that our serial offender, Rex, this was some place that if he was picking up any of his victims, any of his of these escorts, or was taking them to a place other than home, that this is an area, having dealt most of my career in patrolling parks um, and other areas where lover lanes are and where people meet up with others to have whatever type of affairs or interactions they have. State parks are at the top of the list. That is a common meeting area. And not only, some of the state parks can be gated and shut off at certain times, but there's always these little pullovers and pull offs and places where people, the lover lanes, and you'll see a lot of times serial offenders, um, as far as some of the others, um, like Ted Bundy, um, and would go to these parks, and that's where they would troll for victims. Now, would he have been able to do that? Is there certain lovers lanes that are identified out here near the state park where late night people might be, or early morning, and are in having these interactions? Possible, and I would think probably so. Um, and like I said, the reason I really want to look at this is that, did Rex have any interaction, and did he take any of his victims here prior to taking them to the final dump site at Gilgo Beach? And was any of the crimes or any interactions done at this or near this state park? And I'm sure that this state park, if it hasn't been searched, is high on the list of areas to be searched. And we'll find that out in the coming days, and whatever law enforcement would do as far as looking for other potential victims. Would I be shocked if they don't find victims up in here? It, I, I, I believe there probably will be somebody found up in this region, and not just associated with Shannan, but associated with other possibilities of criminal acts by Rex. So, of course, like I said, the behavioral science units are going to go in there. They're going to identify other dumping areas and where those possibilities would be. And of course, the state parks in these areas would be high on the list. Then we look at, of course, we have Rex here, who has been charged in the death, and he had a court hearing today. And um, they, from my understanding of all the evidence, and it's a mountain of evidence that, of course, coming from the prosecution side, that says we have a mountain of evidence against him. We have tetrabytes of information. We have 13 years of investigative notes and documents and things. And so they're going to absolutely look at all of this. They went into the house. They've stripped the house of anything and everything, trying to look. Whereas with the CSI and the next steps of trying to link him to not only the known victims, but they're going to be looking at and finding DNA profile of unknown females and males from within his residence. And any unknown male or female that's missing, that there's a DNA profile in his residence, is going to be huge. Because from that DNA profile, it's going to be a lot like when we look at John Wayne Gacy of the missing persons that were associated with him and his acts. And they'll do the same thing. And we have a lot better technologies now that they will be able to go in there, because a lot of these missing persons, their DNA profiles are somewhere, and they'll be able to cross-reference. And how long would that take? The lab work and everything that's about to come out of this case is going to be incredible. The workload that these labs have, that they're facing, is going to be huge. And so from within his residence, and if we take what the prosecutor said about that mountain of evidence that has been recovered and all that trace evidence, that they will, I believe, if he took any of them to his residence, or there was any type of violent encounter, or through the packaging and using Locard's principle, exchange principle, that from the victims, if he dumped them, and all the victims that he dumped over the years, he would have introduced that into his vehicle and would have brought that evidence from the crime scene back to his residence. For the fact that we know that he took things from his residence and placed on the victims, not intentionally, but they were found on the victims, and that's what led to his arrest. So we know Locard's principle is there, but now they're going to reverse engineer it, and through the search warrants at his residence, on his vehicles, and anything else that they can find on this individual, I think the number of victims will absolutely grow. But here's what they crawled through that swamp with, and you see from the width of the tracks and everything, the footprint of it, that the going of traveling through this harsh terrain isn't easy. But you can see that it doesn't look like it's anything that you couldn't navigate on foot by, and I'm sure it would probably be difficult, but it's not something that would be impossible. And of course, that's the residence once again. But we're just looking at, and like I said, right now, I don't have anything that says that Shannan and the Gilgo Four are connected. It would be highly unusual for them not to be connected. No. People can die at the hands of another offender, and I do believe that she was being pursued. Everything, my first instinct is yes, from listening to the 911 call. And then the supporting evidence of that is the separation of her clothing and her skeletal remains. And I can't explain that. And until that is explained to me of why she would have done that, I just don't see that happening. But it is possible. So we just have to see where that goes. All right. You got any questions?
I do. Hold on. Let me write this.
Appreciate everybody for being here tonight. And but like I said, it'd just be one of those huge coincidences of that during the search for her, they discovered a serial offender. Is it possible? Yes. And I believe unless they get that final connection, and Rex has to either cross-reference out with Shannan's phone number and interactions of previous dates, or they have to through the homeowner or through the driver. If there's no crossing of any of those three, And now that they know who Rex is, I think it would be relatively simple to find out if he had interactions with any of them. But if there's not, then I think that she may actually be an independent victim of a different offender.
Ready?
Uh-huh.
All right. Blue light for gifted memberships from Gail and Miss Brenda.
Thank you for your support. Appreciate that.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And this is for Kamala.
I just want my blue light special, please. And did Mr. Steve get a blue light for the road? No, I've got about
Working on it.
I've got about 4 weeks to get that built and approved and tested and presented to our member group. And the members will get to see the blue light first.
All right. And then let me go back up here. Take that off there. All right. So 63 clocks. Steve, was SG's approximate time of D known released? Wondering how long after 9/11 she was unalived.
And I think, and that's the thing is, we're only looking at a narrow window of opportunity of the time frame from the time that Shannan was last seen at 5 o'clock, or the last phone call from a neighbor that she went to the house and then she fled from there. And he called 911 somewhere around 5 o'clock. And then, of course, I don't know what time the sun came up that morning. I don't know if it says on my weather or not when sunrise is. It appears to be somewhere around 6 a.m., somewhere in that time frame. And so, so you're only, daylight is, the sun, you have sunrise coming on. And of course, at that time, you're looking at a narrow opportunity because the offender would have had a narrow window of opportunity to commit this crime. So I think that within the 5 o'clock, when she fled that last scene, and when the phone calls ended at that, whatever that last moments are, that that's whenever I believe that she would have met up with whoever is in the area and has the abilities to commit that crime. And but it is a very narrow time frame.
Okay, you got several. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. And from Josh, do you have any opinions on the private medical examination that found that there was damage to the hyoid bone?
Yes, we saw that last night. I was talking, and someone said there was even a hole discovered within that bone, which is, I don't know what the measurements and dimensions of that hole was, but that's interesting that there would be that. But they said it was cracked and that was indicative of strangulation. And it was in the second autopsy, and she's face up. If she's face up, I don't see how it could be any type of accidental drowning of that. And it just doesn't make sense. Could she have died from a drug overdose? Well, if she did, she died a long time afterwards for the fact that it's not what you normally, or I've seen on more than one occasion, where you the overdose is almost to the point that when you first are exposed to that chemical level, you pass out. That wasn't the case with her. And so we have to look at all that. But the strangulation issue with the separation of clothes is another supporting piece of evidence that doesn't make sense that she died of any type of accident or natural occurrence. Something happened.
Me.
Huh?
Me.
Yes.
All righty. Let's see here. And this is from Kathy. Did police find an earring or some kind of jewelry at the doctor house?
I seem to have heard that somewhere. I can't remember if that's so or not. But regardless, they know they did the interview and they cleared. And so they know that there was some interactions at the residence, and there's never been an argument about those issues. And I believe that the homeowners have been cleared, and the driver have been cleared for whatever reasons, and we just have to go at it. And you know, I don't know what the investigation part of it is. Just because they've been cleared doesn't mean that they didn't commit those and issues, and we just have to see uh, as law enforcement looks at these crimes once again, what the conclusions will be.
Okay. And Josh, wasn't she found near a property of a doctor or person who later called the family?
I believe so, and like I said, there's been. I think that was part of the movie or part of one of the things. Um, but yes, I think there was a phone call made, and she had interactions there, and I think that, like I said, um, I don't know the all the information about that.
And from Anna, a starting question is, was her driver okay? If yes, then she ran from him from the safety of his car.
And like I said, that is something that is very curious, and I don't know how and what the relationship was between and what went on at the residence uh, through the homeowner and the driver. She's an escort. She's there to do certain things. And what was the relationship that she had with the driver and with this individual? Were both of them trying to calm her, or were both of them trying to force her? And it's not, you know, the working relationships that you see with these individuals that um, work in this type of trade. They're not always the friendliest, and they're there, and some of those relationships are very, very abusive, and it's a terrible situation uh, for the women. Um, and you know what type of communications and what type of relationships did she have with the driver? I don't know.
Okay. And from Josh, why do you believe it took 18 months to search that area?
And that's
I think I asked that too,
yeah, yeah,
didn't
you did. Um, um, and it may have been that it had been searched earlier, and as we often see in some of these things, that um, uh, once a person becomes skeletonized, and where did they search originally? How did they search originally? And some of this thick stuff, absolutely, you know, um, it's not always easy to find a body or skeletal remains. Um, it's far easier when they're fresh than it is when they're a skeleton, for the fact that you'll have everything from wildlife, birds, um, odors, um, and that can lead you to where a victim is. Not so much after months and months, but was there a search early on in that area and they just walked right past or drove right by, and that they just didn't look in that area? I have no idea why it took them so long to get there, because it is relatively within just a mile or two of the area of where she went missing.
Okay. And from Kathy, if she was on drugs, wouldn't they be able to find that on her hair?
And yes, and did they, and was there? And you're correct. Yes, there's certain chemicals that they'll look for, and look for that drug fingerprint. And but the drugs may be that she was a user long term. I have no idea, but that's not something that's uncommon in this as an escort that you find a lot of these women that are, they do have those drug habits.
All right. And from Kathy, do you think they knew she called 911?
Oh, yes. Um, and because, she's on there, and, they're their perception of who she's talking to, and they said that you can hear the individuals in the background. So if you can hear the individuals in the background talking, then of course those individuals can hear her talking, and and describing exactly what's going on. And she's able to um, leave the residence, and as she is running away, and these individuals are either trying to help her or harm her. And who are these individuals? I don't know. If you take it at face value, um, from what the homeowner said, it's time to leave. um, that he's just trying to get her away from his property. And then when you have the driver, that she's fleeing from, is she fleeing from him because she's fearful of what he's going to do? Um, all of that's possible. That it could have just been a domino effect of there's really no one for her to turn to. She feels threatened by everyone.
Okay. All right. And the next is going to be from Josh. If it is connected, LISK wouldn't have to be a crime of opportunity unless LISK was party to person who had called for her services.
And we have this narrow window, and would and has, when they look at um, Rex, and they see at what times did he have these interactions, when did he make these dates, did he make them for this time frame early in the mornings, or it is a weekend, it's Saturday, May the 1st. um, and was he where was his wife at during this time frame? And if he is involved and his wife's out of town, there is the possibility that he could have been in the area. There's the possibility that he was scheduling for a you know a date. But law enforcement, now that they have him, they'll be able to look into that and see what his normal activities are. They'll be able to tell from his um, profile, because they'll do a profile on him. They'll see what was his normal times of getting up in the morning, what was his normal times of going to bed, what was his times of when he went trolling for some of these escort services. What were those times? Because those other victims will have been within the same things, and people are creatures of habits. They have those interactions um, built into whatever works best for them. It's a learned behavior, and whatever those opportunities were presented, and what was his preferred hunting times. And if it falls outside those parameters, then of course it takes us off the scales that it was a crime of opportunity, or that he's even involved with her death.
Okay. Blue light for Tony, and look where he's from, Sweden.
Okay.
What's that say?
So what do you think?
100
Yeah,
FEK. Oh, that must be their
the
max.
Swedish. Yes,
I got you.
Is he guilty? I believe the probable cause affidavit, and from what the prosecutor says, and where it went with the court today, um, it's up to a jury to find his final guilt. Do I think that the probable cause exists for his arrest and everything? Yes. And being from the law enforcement part of the world, um, I tend to agree that when officers go to the court systems and they have that probable cause, that yes, more times than not, he's guilty. And I do believe so at this point.
And welcome, Tony.
It
It's
says
his first
$10.
night here.
Appreciate your support.
Absolutely, we do.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So let me jump back up.
Because I'll be using that in about 4 weeks.
Yep. All right. Let's see here. So we did Josh. All right. And Josh has another question. Does Shannan fit the profile of the other victims?
Well, I guess she would. You know, um, she was an escort. She was in a high risk. Um, she's a female. And from that standpoint, these serial offenders, and that's who he dealt with. Um, and you can look at the victims and the ages and everything, and the time frames there. But we just don't know if he ever had any interactions with her. You know, when she gave up calling 911, is there the possibility that she hit Rex's number and said, "Come get me"? Um, I mean, there's all different types of possibilities. Not saying that's what happened, but law enforcement is going to look at that, and they're going to look at her phones and did she make a phone call to a burner phone way back then? We just don't know. Law enforcement knows. We just don't know.
All righty. Making me work for it tonight.
Excellent.
All right. And Tina Moose question, Steve, do you think Rex could have been dropping off a
Victim.
I say that? Victim and come across Shannan running?
Actually, Chris and I, we talked for about 15 or 20 minutes on that very subject. And if that was a possibility. And I went back and looked at some of the victims of when they went missing. All the victims that we know about at that point either went missing a long time before or they went missing after May the 1st. So with that, but that doesn't mean that there's not that possibility. There may be an unknown victim that hasn't been found yet that this exact scenario could have been. That yes, he was out there at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, or 3 o'clock, or he was in that area, or he was at the state park, or he was anywhere. And but you know, the likelihood of that happening, that it'd be like if you were being attacked, and at one point, and as you um, went to the hospital to be treated for your injuries, that on the way to the hospital you were attacked again by another individual, and the odds of that happening is extremely high. Is it possible? Yes, but you know, I I just don't see it right now, but it is a possibility.
All right. And Cynthia donated 5 memberships.
Thank you,
So
sir.
we
Appreciate
appreciate
that.
that. All right. And 848. All right. And from Kathy, did they find an extra hole through her neck?
Well, they found it through the bone, and of course she's skeletonized. If they, I don't know, um, from that description, it's whatever injuries to the bone surfaces, and that's all they have to work with. They don't have muscle, they don't have skin. All they have is skeleton. From what I uh, took from the description, but they did find a hole in that bone.
Okay. And from Slapstick, could she have been deliberately drugged before she called 911?
Yes, and it could have been by mutual, it could have been by consent. She may have voluntarily induced or took drugs. Absolutely possible. And then something could have set her off, or it could, there's always the possibility that everything is totally drug related. But the finding of her separated from her clothes with the injuries to her neck and the hole in the bone, and the injury to that bone, you know, it doesn't bode well for that it's just a natural or accidental death.
Okay. And big ups. She was definitely at a home in Oak Beach area. Whose home? I believe I heard Rex's voice on the 911 call, and LE identified MP as being there. Why isn't MP in custody?
Be careful with the names, guys. Yes, law enforcement looked at all the individuals involved, and they didn't say that they had any involvement. Will they reopen the case, and is it a possibility? But as far as the other voice in the background is the homeowner, and that she was contracted to have some type of relations with, and fled that home. And but it was they've identified those two people as being in the background, and they've cleared both of them, from my understanding. Why, I don't know.
Okay. And from Miss Anna, a good second question is, does RH have any connection to that gated community?
And that is a great, and that's exactly the point that we're looking at, that law enforcement is going to look at these individuals, and and even take it to a step further, as you allude to in here, that they'll look at Rex and see, um, now that we know who he is. At the time, they didn't know who he was, but now they'll look through the properties, and they'll look through the history and the property owners, and see, uh, does he have a connection with any of those homeowners, not just this one individual in particular, but the others. And that's a good point. And they'll look at that. I'm almost positive.
Okay. And from Josh, another creator you've worked with, Steve, showed drone footage with seeming evidence pulled from a dug hole. Any ideas of what they could be if you have seen it?
Yes, we discussed that. Chris and I did. And that's Mob Crew. and but if you, I think it's more like, if it's burlap, it's going to be huge, especially if it's burlap, or it could just be clothing articles that have rotted in the earth. As as everyone that's ever been around any cloth articles and on the ground, when you pull them up, you can just have a towel out laying on the ground, and if it stays out there any time, that when you try to lift it up, it fragments and it comes apart. And so some types of clothing articles are extremely easy to degrade and fall into smaller parts and different patterns. And looking at it as they dumped it and everything into the bag, um, I agree that I believe it is going to be some type of clothing article or burlap. If it's burlap, that's going to be huge. Um, and we'll just have to see, is that part of that mountain of evidence that the prosecutor was talking about today.
And Miss Kamala wants to know what Mrs. Steve thinks about Rex's eyes. Would you want to tell her what my answer to you was?
Oh, it's just shocked me like you hadn't told me 10 times.
Ever since I saw this dude's photo, I have told Steve he's got the eyes.
Let me find him right here. There he is.
You look at him. There is actually a better picture of this guy with his eyes.
Okay, but now on this one picture here, though, is it still bad enough?
Creepy?
Well, yeah, creepy, but does he hit the high
ick?
The ick?
He is the ick factor.
But I mean, that kind of almost looks
smirkish. No thanks.
Well,
no,
okay.
The eyes are dead giveaways. Kamala, I'm with you.
Okay.
See there? I'm just saying, it's in the eyes. All right, and Miss Miranda, Mr. Steve, is there any other reason that the victim would have that type of neck injury other than due to a homicide?
Well, I don't know what type of animals are in that area. Could some type of animal possibly during what happens in nature cause that type of injury? It's possible. Um, uh, but they would have been other, as the bones are scattered and pulled, if during any types of scavenging by any type of canine or certain other animals um, that could crack a bone. It's possible, but I think that they would have seen other indicators showing that it's due to some type of animal interaction versus the doctor was pretty clear that it was indicative of strangulation, or the medical examiner of strangulation. So he didn't see anything of that could possibly be from some type of animal interactions.
I'm just saying, I've got some eyes going on in chat. I'm not the only one. See? All right. And from Miss Paula, does anyone have any information about her driver that night? Has she hired him previously? Was he connected to any other suspicious activities?
Well, and that's the thing is that these drivers and what was his history of not only with this escort but other escorts, and what was his intent, what was his of why he was there, and what was he trying to do, and how what was his duties uh, for that night, and I don't know. And of course, law enforcement would check into that. And if he is of more of the being part of that trade, um, would he have uh, had contact with other individuals and other escorts? And is this what his full time job was? And but that's a good question, and law enforcement would identify uh, how he earned a living.
Mhm. Okay, and from Renee, Renee's got two of them. This is the first. He owns property in Chester. Do you know if that property is going to be searched?
I don't know if you're talking about Rex. I don't know where all the property he has, but I'm pretty sure any properties he has that if they can get a warrant for that, there will be a search there. I believe that would be the case.
All right, and whoop, let me unstart. And the second one, Shannon's mom had a suitcase full of notes Shannan kept about her clients. Why didn't they check the notebooks?
And I believe they probably will, and I believe the family will also. That they'll go through that. We'll find now that they know. It's one thing when you don't know, but now they have certain things that law enforcement's aware of, and that they'll backpedal. And I'm hoping they'll backpedal. I may be giving them too much credit, but I believe they will backpedal and look at this case, and either like the attorney, what's his name, John Ray, he thinks that there is bad actors involved in this. Now, is Rex part of one of the bad actors? And they're going to go back and look at it. And I absolutely believe they will now. And if they can make the connection to Rex, they will. If they can't make a connection to Rex, then of course I think it'll just fall by the wayside, and there may never be justice for Shannan.
You're done.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate everybody being here tonight. I appreciate all the support, all the donations. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, share it. And we appreciate everybody being in here. And y'all stay safe out there, and we will see y'all soon.
Wait.
What we got?
Let's see here. Oh, whoop. Nope. Let me go back to this one. Miranda at True Crime Web. Don't you think it seems like LE cares more about serial cases?
Yes, and because they're high profile and they're high publicity, and if you look at what the Green River said about it, that he thought that he could prey upon this demographic, the escorts, trafficked women, because he thought that no one would pay attention to how many victims he had. They're easily disposed of, easily come up missing, easy to disguise. And that's how come he pursued them and victimized them. And so from the Green River, we learned that. And is this exact same reason that law enforcement, a lot of times, they just don't have the resources to put into and look at this slice of society and these individuals. And it's sad to think that any organization would do that, but it's apparent that it does occur, that within our law enforcement and everything, certain times, certain types of victims are overlooked, and hopefully these officers never looked at it as any class of people is expendable. And has that occurred? Probably. More, almost certainly has it by certain individuals. But all in all, law enforcement, once it's determined that we have a victim that died at the hands of evil, that we pull all the, we pull everything out and unite and try to find justice for them. Because whatever their acts are, whatever person that does to survive doesn't deserve what happened to these victims.
Okay, and we got some blue lights here from Cynthia. She gave 5 memberships earlier, and now she's coming back for more.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Like I said, we appreciate all the support because it helps us do what we do.
All right. Then we've got
Criminal Med, 199 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate your support. Absolutely.
All right. And let me go see if there's any questions out there. Let's see here. I think that is it.
All right.
I don't see any. I hope I didn't miss any. If I did, I apologize.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody being here tonight. And like I said, y'all stay safe out there. We got some more stuff coming up later in the week. And but we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you, Mods. Love you.